Cowboy Bebop, widely regarded as the greatest anime of all time. Depending on your perspective, this is either towering praise or akin to being termed the least virulent industrial solvent to be poisoned with. Regardless, it's a unique and special treasure from a long bygone era of finite anime, one of the few to transcend interest barriers and garner praise from people who wouldn't be caught dead simping for waifus or debating best girlses. And, there's a good reason for that. Bebop is not merely a good anime, it's a good-ass show that happens to find itself at one of the most unlikely cultural cross-sections imaginable. A well-written animated series aimed at adults, and a drama at that. Most of the time, people would just make a Family Guy knockoff and call it a day. But Bebop, it's a mature show that's actually mature. It's not about guns and booba, no, it's about martial arts and loneliness. All on Wii and shit. Jackie Chan meets Jean-Paul Sartre. It's an adult animation, not in that way, but more like a skee-ball place where the prize tickets can be exchanged only for dental floss, deodorant, and reasonably sized USB drives. It's colorful and austere, like the Greek colonnades of old. It's also probably the only anime series in history where all the characters look like they're in their 30s or older and aren't canonically 16 or some shit. Its existence is all the more miraculous considering how the show was originally commissioned. Bandai wanted a kids' cartoon to promote a line of spaceship toys. For the show to end up as an action-heavy, violent film noir Yakuza drama with spaceships, it took either some astonishing miscommunication or brazen and willful malicious compliance. And I love that for it. This alone demonstrates how it's truly a product so unique that it practically shouldn't exist in our world. But we got lucky, so lucky that we got not only the 26-episode series, but a movie on top of it to help salve the wounds of post-Bebop depression. This is why I never really wanted anyone to try to make more of it. We used up all the luck this universe has to offer getting what we got. Why challenge fate? The series is near perfect as it is, and its existence is predicated on such a staggering series of lucky breaks. When you have resources, plus opportunity, plus auteur-level control, and free creative reign, sometimes you end up with a once-in-a-generation work of art that keeps people talking about it for decades to come. Other times, though, you end up with the all-share version of West Side Story. That is not a joke, though it may be a high-effort shit post. So, what's so special about Cowboy Bebop? I have to admit, I don't really know what its place is in the culture nowadays. Is it strictly the province of the nostalgia-afflicted? Is one outing themselves as an out-of-touch boomer fuck the moment one waxes wistful over it? Or is it a yet accessible cultural bellwether like Evangelion? On the one hand, see what I did there, saying you like Cowboy Bebop is a seemingly universal mark of good taste, but on the other hand, you don't seem to see that many long-lived memes based off of it. I mean, there's that one woman who can kick my ass one, but it's still nothing rising to the occasion of a SpongeBob or a Harry Potter. And maybe that's because it's not a baby show for children. I don't know, man. My paracultural literacy does not allow me to understand why certain things thrive in the collective unconsciousness and others do not. Mementos isn't a real place, Regardless, my memories of this show are of an unassailable masterwork perched well beyond the reach of criticism. Though a lot of that had to do with the adultness of it making such an impression on my younger mind when I first saw it. There's a lot working on you, from the art style to the mature themes, the story, and the amazing-ass jazz fusion soundtrack. Boy, man, that OST in particular stands so well as a standalone work that it was the only way I experienced the show for years after watching it the first time. In fact, for the longest time, I was actually afraid to ever rewatch Cowboy Bebop, for fear of discovering it to be louder, dumber, and more libidinal than I remember it being. And if that were the case, I'd have to reassess my opinion of a formative piece of entertainment media somewhat. Truly a fate worse than death. People might pass me by while Space Lion can be heard blasting out my car, and they'll think, wow, there goes a cultured and competent adult with well-refined taste, while I'm sitting there thinking, they have no idea this music came from an anime. Hey, wait, that's kind of a meme, right? Someone get on that. Show it to K-san or somebody. Happily, I did eventually get the gumption to give it a rewatch, and I can safely say it's better with age. Cowboy Bebop is all about isolation, alienation, lack of belonging, existentialism, all themes that have aged like the finest of wines, wouldn't you say? All the characters are these moorless weirdos with some kind of failed past, so despite being a crime serial set in space in the future, it's super relatable. The show focuses on each of the main characters enough that the core of the story could work in just about any time period or setting, and the cool future backdrop ends up just being a stylized way to reinforce the tone and the themes. They out-Hitchcocked Hitchcock, biatch! The setting is really well conceived and helps shape the motivation of the people in the story beautifully, even the weirdos who don't seem to have relatable motives. Living on a spaceship is portrayed not as an aspirational utopian dream, but as a mundane and kinda crappy workaday experience. Still, it seems to beat cubicle life. Though I must say how much I appreciate the future depicted in this show. It's one of the only sci-fi series set in a middle ground, imperfect, and believable future. Neither a utopian technological wonderland, nor a cynical dystopian nightmare. And for God's sake, it's not a post-apocalyptic zombie wasteland. It's a world where you can travel at FTL speed to Venus for business meetings, but people still smoke! Indoors! Computers can develop personalities, but crime still fulfills demand for things like drugs and gambling. There's a lot of new, and it's brought most of the old with it, for better or worse. But the setting, like I said, it's really just a backdrop. Where the show really shines is giving everyone in it a list of cogent, if somewhat unhinged, reasons for being where they are and doing what they're doing. They managed to fill us in on all the important character moments from their backstory over the course of just 26 episodes, and we get some nice development from beginning to end too. In all this, it manages to juggle a decent range of tone and genre focus too. You got violent, eerie episodes like Black Dog Serenade and Ballad of Fallen Angels, but infamously silly stories like Mushroom Samba and Cowboy Funk. Shinichiro Watanabe once described the show as being 80% serious and 20% comedy. I'd say he's about right. It's also a great example of art from adversity. It became very clear to me while editing this how many shots there are of not a whole lot happening, but they use it to great effect to establish mood and to really embellish contemplative moments. That it also helps keep the cost down is probably a nice bonus. One other thing that really helps it stand out is the unusual approach to the soundtrack. Not just because of the compositions themselves, or because it's one of only 6 anime in history whose opening theme song isn't. I'm talking about all the times the soundtrack goes left when you'd expect it to go right, like in the chase scenes. Often instead of an exciting, fast-paced score, it'll be this super melancholic jazz or lilting folk singing. After all, usually when it comes down to a death chase, things aren't exciting and beautiful so much as tragic, or at the very least kind of ambivalent. You arrest your girlfriend's boyfriend, Jet. It's a little awkward. If I had to point out any weak points in the series, I'd say there's one episode early on where eco-terrorists want to make everyone be turned to monkey in a manner that's somewhat more fanciful and strange than the series otherwise goes for. It's alright, and I definitely like how our bounty hunting crew so often gets in over their head with little reward, but it always struck me as a strangely deep foray into full-on sci-fi territory, this one. There's also an episode fleshing out much of the backstory of one of our main characters that relies a bit heavily on astonishing coincidence for my taste, but in the end it doesn't detract from the logic of the character motivation, so all is well. These relatively minor hiccups are more than compensated for by the brilliant episode where the Welsh Corgi starts tripping balls. So, theming, writing, soundtrack, characters, story, cool sci-fi setting and some pretty-ass art, striking imagery that speaks fluent the language of cinema. You got yourself a solid watch that'll stick with you long after you're done watching it. If you're wondering what my thoughts are on that remake, I've only seen the fan edit where they add the Seinfeld music to a scene that comes off as especially sitcom-y. And being even a little sitcom-y is a deeply strange direction to have taken this show in. What the? I might give it a proper watch someday, but I stand by my lingering disinterest. We just didn't need new Bebop. The series' short run length sort of reinforces the Ichigo Ichie theme, you know? That's kind of what makes it resonate all the more.
Everything has a beginning and an end. Life is just a cycle of stops and starts. There are ends we don't desire, but they're inevitable. We have to face them. That's what being human is all about.
Whatever happens, happens.